sitting there kind of like, you can imagine the question marks over my head. I'm like, not the brightest apple in the barrel, walking around one of their islands following the footsteps of a Buddhist monk. Every time you meet someone, this could be the last time you ever meet them. So
Vi är spelskaparna.
Welcome to Spelskaparna, and guest today is
David Ventura.
And you have been working in games for a long time, and a lot in the music game genre, which I don't think I've talked to anyone to this date who has done that really. So it's going to be really interesting to talk to you today.
Great.
But let's start off with what was the first company that you worked for?
The first game company I worked for was Rockstar. At the time, it was called Angel Studios. So it's Rockstar San Diego. And they produced the Midnight Club series and the Red Dead Redemption series now. So I worked on Midnight Club 2 and Red Dead Revolver on PS2.
As a programmer, or?
Yes, I was working as a programmer on the engine team. So Rockstar has a long history of really, really good tech for their games. And I was on the team that was responsible for adding in new features to help better rendering and graphics and AI, and then sharing that core technology to all of the product teams that were building the games for platform.
Okay, cool. And so for how long did you work there before you went to Japan?
I worked at Rockstar for, I think, 3 or 4 months. I was an intern. It was during my second year of graduate school. And at that time, I had worked in Japan at a research lab in Kyoto, and I wanted to go work in games full-time. So I started secretly going over to Japan for interviews and things like that. And once I found one, I moved over right after graduation.
So do you remember like the first couple of days when you started working there?
Yeah.
How it was?
It was... I was overstimulated to the point where like it made me exhausted. Like to be in Tokyo for the first time and to see the endless neon and the lights and all of the people in the stores calling out, welcoming in customers, and the foreign characters everywhere not being able to read anything. It's like my brain had a new level of exhaustion from being the first couple of days there. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I worked at a company called Ennis, and they were a small studio. When I joined, I think I was the second programmer. We had like 7 or 8 people in the company at the time. And we worked on music and rhythm games for a number of handheld and home consoles, working second party with Nintendo and with Microsoft, and then some other things for Koei.
Did you have any previous experience from this kind of games?
No, actually, I hadn't played a lot of music games before I went to Japan. It was playing those games, I guess, and being introduced to that when I moved to Japan that kind of opened my eyes to it. I'd always liked dabbling in music, but I didn't know anything about theory or rhythm or genres, that kind of stuff. But it's something that I was really inspired by the passion the people in the company had, because they were a group of musicians with musical training. So to them, it was natural to talk in the language of music and to make that the language of gaming. So that was fantastic for me, a great way to grow.
Yeah. And there are a lot of more music games in Japan than there is in the West.
Right.
And like I've only played like a few, but they're quite different. It's not like many Western style music games like Guitar Hero are pretty straightforward, but they can be quite wacky. The Japanese ones.
Yeah.
So what was the first game that you worked on over there?
Right. So the first game that I worked on and we shipped was Osu Tatakai Oendan, which is a rhythm game for Nintendo DS that we did with Nintendo second party. So Oendan are the cheerleaders of Japan. So they're usually young men that are with sports teams or local squads and work in high school and their job is to have very exciting and deep, rich cheers to get people excited and make them want to fight harder and win and things like that. So when you go to a baseball game in Japan, you see the oendan. There's these boys that are like standing facing not the field but facing the crowd and shouting at the top of their lungs, not using a megaphone, just like,
always boys.
Yeah, it's usually boys and sometimes middle-aged men, but usually males, and they're shouting at the crowd like, "All right, guys, come on, let's cheer for so-and-so who's coming up to the plate now." And then like every player has their own chant and their own cheer, and everybody knows them. And then the oendan starts the cheer, and then the crowd joins in, and then there's a little bit of call and response. And
that's so much fun.
and just like throwing your whole heart, like they become hoarse like halfway through the game. That's why they have a heavy rotation. So we had this game about oendan that their job was to cheer for people in trouble. People and pets and kids and businessmen and things like that, from all these wacky situations coming from trying to get a job and then pass an interview to get into school to ultimately, I think the final level is there's a giant meteor that's about to crash into the earth and the whole planet has to cheer to stop the meteor from destroying the earth with the power of positive vibes and spirit.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And what parts did you work on?
I worked as a sub-programmer, so I did the authoring tool, the software that the musicians would use to create the charts that says like where you have to tap at what time in the song and how that ties to the animations. I made the world map where you're scrolling around and the DS at the time was very novel. You would use the stylus and you could pan around on the screen and then select the different hot spots, and then you would hear the preview of the song that you could play there, and it would do an animation, things like that. Yeah, so I was supporting the lead programmer on all the peripheral work.
But that kind of required that you got to learn some things about musical theory.
Yes, yeah. I didn't take any courses at the time, and I didn't have any formal training, so it was really kind of on the job and kind of like a crucible. So like the musicians would like be like, okay, no. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's emphasis on the 2 and on the 4. And I'm sitting there kind of like, you can imagine the question marks over my head. I'm like, on the 2 and the 4. Okay, sure. Why not? All right. Okay. And then I'd make the animation. They'd look at it and go, no, this is the 1 and the 3. It needs to be on the 2 and the 4. Not to the left, right. It should be left, right. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that was, it didn't make any sense at the time. But now looking back at it after working with them and doing music for so long, it's very nostalgic about picking up bits and pieces here and there.
Yeah. But I guess that was like, it's a very unusual way of learning music, but it works, I guess.
Yeah.
Were all of your colleagues Japanese?
Yes. When I started, actually there was one guy that had been living there for a while, and he was Canadian. He left a couple months after I started working, but other than that, everybody was Japanese. And the only person that could speak English in the company was the CEO or the creative director, the vice president. So I didn't speak any Japanese at the time either, really. I mean, I could say, good morning, how are you, thank you, and stuff like that. But that's about the extent.
Yeah.
So that was also kind of a trial by fire to like talk with my boss, who was Japanese, who spoke no English at all, and learned about not only how to be a good programmer, but how to be a good programmer in Japanese at the same time. And then sometimes, when there was no other recourse, I had to go to the vice president to try to get him to translate.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
Yeah, the first 6 months, my brain just throbbed every day because it was like an immersion from nothing but 100% Japanese for 10, 12 hours a day, not knowing any Japanese at all. And the brain works so hard to try to figure it out and grok it. So even if you want to try to tune it out, you can't. You just have to soldier through it.
How did they, like your colleagues, handle it? Because it must be quite frustrating for them as well, like the lead programmer, for instance.
Yeah. There was a lot of sighing. There was a lot of speaking very slowly. Fortunately for programmers, I think it's easier for programmers than artists, because programmers, the Japanese word for a lot of constructs is in katakana, which is the alphabet the Japanese use for foreign words.
Oh, yeah.
So like the word for computer is komputa and things like that, or like pointa, like a pointer that you would have in programming and things like that. So it's like you can kind of get what they're trying to say when it comes to the most important parts about like works and doesn't work. But then when you're talking about something about like quality or a sense of responsibility or, you know, like those things, concepts, of course, are just purely Japanese words. And that's, okay, I hear a word here and there. Oh, this word keeps popping up. I wonder what it means. And then I look in the dictionary. It's like, oh, obligation, responsibility. Yeah, I guess I should get better at that. All these words that are not important just, I guess, as a professional, but also to Japanese, where a sense of, you know, duty and dedication are key.
And I'm curious about like something as like the code itself. In what kind of like variable names, simple stuff like that, how basic stuff like that, what kind of language do they use, or like what are the names?
That's true. That's a great point, is that I mean, you have to type with English characters because there were limitations at the time about, which character set you're using. So it's in the what's called Romaji, which is like Japanese but written with Western characters phonetically. So I can read it and I can say it, but I don't necessarily know what it means. But like maybe then I have to like, you know, look up what that word is or in the dictionary or something. Like, oh, this variable means it's like an index, or oh, this is a vertice, or this is a matrix or something like that. Now I understand, kind of thing like that.
Because I guess you also have to write in Japanese.
I think I just wrote in English, and they kind of had to. And like it's like a mutual tolerance, you know. They have to tolerate my English variable names. I have to tell it they're Japanese ones, and we broke even.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also, like culturally, with working, how is that from comparing to the US?
Yeah, that's a tricky thing too, because like I said, I moved there right when I was 23 years old. So at that time, I didn't have a lot of reference points for like this is how things should be. I'd worked at some software companies as an intern in America, but like, you know, an intern versus a full-time employee, of course, there's a gap there. But from what I've heard now, and I guess in terms of more seeing it from the other way around, as a professional working in a white-collar job, 40 hours plus a week, Japan is my base, and now I have Sweden, which is like the foreign thing to me. So to me, Japan feels like the natural way, and Sweden feels like the different way. So I can look at it now from the Swedish working perspective and be like, okay, the Japanese, this is more important, and the Swedish, it's this more important. But my impression is that in Japan, effort is rewarded and prized highly, sometimes even more than output. So effort and dedication are more important than maybe doing it effectively or quickly or doing a good job. So you have, with time it's changing, but the values still stand, that you would have the guy that's not the brightest apple in the barrel, but he's there every morning at 8:30, and he works all day until 8:30, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and he's just like a plow horse, and he's just in there and he's fighting, and he puts in the hours and he produces stuff. But it's and there's a level of respect, like he's gambatteru, he's working really hard, he's trying his best, and that's more important than maybe the way he's building it or what he's building.
Okay, so how you do stuff can be more important.
What kind of feeling and then the manner you approach things is more important sometimes than the result in Japanese working environments.
I read this book. I actually visited Japan this year, and before that I read a book like about Japan. And in that book they were talking a lot about kata, which is from karate, where you have like this like choreography. You're supposed to do a particular set of movements. The idea is to do it many times over again, so you get to perfection.
Exactly.
And in that book the author talks about that concept is found in many aspects of life and work. That you have this kind of pattern of repeating some kind of fixed set and doing it over and over again. Is that something that you could see, or like, do you recognize this thing?
I recognize it from society. Like you talk about jobs like sushi chefs, or like anything where there's a master and there's a student, or working like in a bakery and things like that. That's incredibly indoctrinated in that process. And like, a sushi guy who wants to be a sushi chef can work for years before he can even touch the rice. Just to learn to like clean the knives and wash things first before he can start working his way up. I think in game development, that might be the case somewhat in maybe the bigger companies, But in general, the nature of game development is that we never have enough time and we never have enough money. So I think some of that stuff kind of gets pushed away in the interest of we got to ship something now. So just kind of do your best, and then it'll come together in the end. Is kind of the belief there. I didn't have anything in particular I was practicing, or I wasn't told to practice any programming forums or learn any basics that way. It was just slowly being given more and more challenging and important tasks.
And so you worked for many years with music games?
Yes, I worked for about 10 years with music games.
And what kind of challenges do you see making specifically games in the music game genre? From a development perspective?
Yeah, there's a number of things that are technical and kind of creative and artistic, and from a team standpoint. From a technical standpoint, it's very important that everything is connected to the music in a very strong way. And that's something you don't have in other games. So every time a sound effect plays, every time you do a transition between two visual states or a menu or a sequence the player is doing from A to B, it needs to be synchronized with the music, because that's what makes it feel really tight. And a lot of people that try to make music games, until you figure this out and can master it, it just, the average person can't describe what the problem is, but the feeling of stuff being spot on and like polished is really built around that, I think, between a sloppy music game and a good music game. So at the very least, even if you can't be creative with it, you need to be locked into the music. Because people, even that don't have a sense of rhythm, I think they feel that a little bit. They don't understand the concept. Beyond that, you need to use that music in a creative kind of way. So that's even the more challenging thing. So then it's not just being timing right. You're like, okay, how can I have the music influence what's happening in the game in such that the story is told through the music? The music has a story. Because the music is changing. You have an intro, you have a chorus, you have a verse, you have bridges and things like that. And maybe you have key changes or other parts. So if you can take all of these elements which are inherent in music to begin with and find a creative way to tie them in, some subtle, some direct, with what the player is doing and how the player experiences the world graphically, then that can be a very powerful thing. And that's where you can get into that realm of, synesthesia, the kind of stuff that Enhance and Mizuguchi-san are after. They built a Tetris Effect and Rez and Space Channel 5 and all those games. So where you're trying to build a concept where the stimulation of the ears and the eyes and the hands, even if you have force feedback, how those all come together to produce a sensation which is larger than those three things independently. And if you can do that in an artful way, then I think you're standing in the top class of music games. But the problem is to find people that understand that is rare. You either find people who understand music really well, but they're not so technical. You understand people who understand the art and the tools very well, but they're not so musically inclined. It's not like you can build a team of like 10 or 15 people that are all, ex-studio musicians that also Maya and Max and Houdini and things like that.
Yeah, because it's important to know, to have this understanding, whatever your position would be, if it's with programming or making art, or
it goes a long way. And if it doesn't, then you need to have a management structure where there's the checking and the guidance, such that the person that's pulling the puppet strings can help the people who don't understand music build something that still operates in that kind of fashion.
Because you didn't know this from the beginning,
No.
but it's something that you learned along the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Is there any issues with, like, it's important, of course, as you said, that it has to feel very tight,
Mm-hmm.
but then you can have some delays, like input lag and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. So depending on what you're trying to build, that latency will affect what you're doing in different ways. So we started out building Owendan and then the Western version, Elite Beat Agents, for Nintendo DS, and that was on a dedicated hardware running a dedicated OS. So the latency lag between when you tap the screen to when the input is processed and then sound can come out is very, very small, just several milliseconds. But then when you get to something like an Android device, where the latency is, there's a screen and there's the graphics and there's the sound, and it depends on which device you have. And, even with iOS devices, with iPhones, it's not as good as a console. But so one time when we started moving towards mobile, we made a rhythm game with Square Enix. And there was an Android version and there was an iOS version. Of course, the iOS version was much easier to build because when that pen goes down, I have to be able to tell if it's right or wrong, and then it has to tie into the sound effect coming back. And if that's off by 30, 60, 90 milliseconds, then it just feels like drunkenness. It's like a sloppy. It's like it's not as bad as VR sickness, but for the music rhythm game experience, it ruins the whole thing. If you're making a game that's not rhythm based, if it's like something like karaoke, or if you're dancing, then you have a lot more leeway there. So we made dance games for Kinect on Xbox 360. And of course, there's a lot more latency in that pipeline between when the Kinect camera sees you and we can process what your body is doing. Yeah. But that's dancing, and it doesn't have to be quite as precise as tapping something on the screen.
Okay, so it depends on the game. Yeah, and I guess I think I played some rhythm game on like an emulator or something, and then I guess it's also probably not as tight.
Depending on which computer you're running it on, and the specs there. Because emulators aren't usually optimized to be to the metal anyway. They're running on top of an operating system, on top of a windowing system, and things like that.
But you shipped quite a lot of games during this time in Japan, and one game was Eden to Green.
Yes, that was one of the last games that I worked on before I left Innis.
What was that?
That was it ended up being a free-to-play game for iOS and Android. That was a tower offense game. So you had like this land which is desolate and covered in like oil and rock, and there's nothing there. And you have these little plants, and you add the plants to the ground, and it spreads this green field to kind of restore nature and to get things back to a nice organic type of lifestyle, as opposed to one that's mechanical. So you plant your little flowers, and some can attack the bad guy robots or cars that are driving at you, and machines, and some can defend and things like that. It ended up being published with Zynga, and it was one of those you can play it, and then you can buy some power-ups or continues and things like that. But it's like card collecting. You get different flowers and different levels. But that game took us a long time to build, because the roots, no pun intended, in that game go all the way back to when I started at the company 10 years before.
Oh, wow.
So we had a dream about a game that we wanted to make. And there have been lots of times over the course of the company where we thought this is the time, where we can build the game we want on our own. If we have this idea, we got the concept, we have this new IP, this world that we want it to be in. And every time we tried to get it started, and for one reason or another, it didn't really get into production or didn't get traction. So we had to kind of put it on the shelf and then work on a game, that had for someone else or that the customer wanted us to collaborate with. So there were lots of evolutions. It started out all the way back in the PS2 era, just shortly after I started. But it was a game that was originally based around music and around nature and this sense of magic and wonder and fantasy. But eventually we got it out. But it, of course, as the market had changed at that point, around 2011, 2012, free to play on mobile was a big thing. Like, now they have more powerful graphic GPUs and stuff like that. So we partnered with NVIDIA for the Android version to show the amazing models and graphics you could have on mobile tablets and stuff like that.
And that was not the game that you shipped was not a music game.
No, not at all. It had catchy music, but that was about it. Yeah, beyond that, it had nothing really music.
How come that that you skipped that?
That's a good question. I think I wasn't involved with the design of the title at the time, but going back to it, I can guess that maybe part of it was the marketability. It was music games still now are not even mainstream. It's had a time, like you have the peak when Rock Band 2 and Guitar Hero 3 and were coming out, and everyone had the plastic guitars and stuff like that. And then there was the crash, and then nobody wanted no more games with plastic guitars, and music games had reached their apex and kind of fizzled out. And now you have a small recurrence of hardcore rhythm games and some more creative ones off the beaten path. But maybe it was a market-based thing at the time, where we'd been making smaller market games for so long. We wanted to try to hit it big. So we tried something that was a bit more general audience favored. I'm not sure.
Okay. So what happened with the game? Was it successful?
Not really, no. Not really, unfortunately.
Which one of your games that you've worked on has been the most successful?
I think that's probably Lips, the karaoke game we made for Xbox 360, in the general sense. I mean, we worked with Microsoft's second party for that one. It was like the SingStar rival.
Yeah.
During that era, and it sold okay. It wasn't as big as SingStar, I think, because of the type of customers that were on PlayStation versus Xbox, and where Xbox was popular and things like that. But it sold fairly well, and it sold well enough that there were several versions of the game that were made, iterations. We made some additional content packs for markets where it was most popular, like in Germany and Spain. We had special versions just for those countries because it was quite popular there. It was one of the weirdest things to me is that when I worked on that game in 2008, and then I left Ennis in 2012 or 2013, and then I moved to Sweden in the summer of 2013. And one of the first places I was living was up in Henriksdal, just over the river in Nacka.
In Stockholm.
In Stockholm, yeah. And they have a Eleganten electronic store in Sickla Shopwörter. And if you go, I walked into that Eleganten, in 2013, and I'm walking around downstairs, and on the wall they had this huge ad for Lips. So they must have built that Eleganten right around when Lips came out or something like that, and a huge promotional poster, and it was still there 5 years later, even though the game has been discontinued for a long time. It made me both a little bit happy and a little bit nostalgic at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, it's also really cool when you're working on something on the other side of the world, and then you can see that it's several years later.
Yeah.
Here as well. Yeah. Is that to make a game like that, a karaoke game, where you also see like how if you have the correct pitch and all that? Is that tricky technically to get that working?
I guess if you've never done it before, it can be a little tough. But after you read some research papers and do it a couple times, if you have someone in your company that's good at digital signal processing, like understands Fourier transforms and that kind of math, then you can get it without too much difficulty, because just to be on pitch or not is not that complicated in your rhythm and things like that. You can really approximate that. So we were using I guess maybe 20 or 30% of the Xbox 360's processing power to do rhythm detection and pitch detection and things like that. It worked fairly well, actually.
So why did you move to Sweden?
I moved to Sweden because I was looking for a change. After I'd been at Ennis for about 10 years, I kind of felt like I needed to mix things up a little bit. So I left the company there, and then I had a couple months where I did a little soul searching. I went on a pilgrimage in Japan, walking around one of their islands, following the footsteps of a Buddhist monk. Doing some meditation and things like that. And I think I was on the beach somewhere, and I realized that, this music thing is really resonating with me. But I want to affect more people than I have up until now. So with games, you make music games and you can affect all of the consumers of that title. So maybe it's, 20,000, 500,000, 1 million or something like that. But if you make a tool for people to make music, if you can build a musical instrument and then 10 million people buy that instrument and they make music for 100 million people, then that's like two factors exponentially. Yeah. So that role of enabling people to build things that I couldn't build and to build better things that make other people happy has always been interesting to me. So I thought I wanted to work in a company that made music software because that had a bigger impact. And at the time, and it's still the case, there were a number of companies that were producing music software, and most of them are in Europe. I'd always wanted to live in Europe and compare that to Japan and see what that is like. So it was either Germany or Sweden. And of the companies I interviewed with, I was most taken by a Swedish one here in Stockholm. So I came here for that job.
And was that Propellerhead?
Yeah, Propellerhead, right.
The company behind the reason.
Exactly.
Okay. So, but I have to ask, when you talk about the pilgrimage, had you been practicing Buddhism before, or how did you end up doing that?
Buddhism has a lot of different levels, I guess. You can approach it to you want to be like, it's not like Catholicism where you say a prayer every day. You kind of, I guess, Japanese people are all Buddhist, but they won't really tell you that they're Buddhist because to them it just feels like natural. It doesn't feel like a religion. It feels like an everyday thing. But I was interested with the concepts that Buddhism teaches in terms of peace and tolerance, understanding, and acceptance of other people and differences and things like that. And I wanted the world to be a better place, and I wanted to try to make myself a better person. So that was appealing to me. And as a coincidence, in visiting one of my temples and visiting a temple in Japan, I saw some signs inside, and that was like an artifact left over from that particular pilgrimage. And I asked my friend about it, and they explained. And then I heard about this trail that they have, a 1,200 kilometer course in the island of Shikoku, and that's kind of neat. So like traditionally, Japanese people go on it when they're have some kind of big problem in their life, like if a loved one died, or if they're wondering about getting divorced, or have some trouble with work or family. It's like to give you an answer to help you clean out your spiritual clock. So I thought, this is a point where I'm at a crossroads in my life, and now I don't have a job where I need to worry about anymore, and I finally have a vacation of more than a week, so I give it a shot. So I walked that trail.
I find it really interesting because a thing like that, even if you're not like believer or anything like that, you can see that will make something for you, that will make a difference no matter what you think. And it actually did affect you quite a lot.
Yes, it was probably the greatest thing that I've done in my life. It was fantastic. I'm so glad.
And you would recommend it to anyone else who had like
if you don't mind walking a lot, and you got to be. I think you have to be kind of stubborn. You either be stubborn or in fantastic shape. You take your pick. And I was not in great shape, so you can figure out what kind of person I am.
Okay, so when you came to Sweden, you already said a couple of things, but what were the biggest differences that you saw between Japan and Europe, Sweden?
So I guess the first kind of thing is aside from the obvious things about scale of Tokyo versus Stockholm and sunshine versus darkness and things like that, being in a company where the place was pretty empty by 5 o'clock every day was like unfathomable to me. I mean, when I worked in Japan, it was like if you go home at 7 o'clock, you're like, okay, you're cutting out early. What's going on? Do you have something special today? Kind of, I mean, we worked too much, and there's lots of different reasons, why Japanese work as much as they do. But I think with Japan, the company is your family, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. So the people that you spend your time with, that you spend all those hours with, building a product, you forge a special kind of bond. I don't think that can ever be destroyed, and it's about as deep as you can get in life. And I think Japanese think that way, and I agree. So for Swedish companies, at least the ones that I've worked with, it was to have people be like, okay, 5 o'clock, I'm punching out. Kind of like, even if the work is half done, or if you didn't quite get to where you wanted to go, it's like, well, I've put in my time and now I'm going to leave. And then people did not go out and drink together after work. I mean, in Japan, it's like quite common that you stop work at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then you go to the bar together and you take last train home together and stuff like that. And drinking together with your coworkers, 2-3 nights a week is not uncommon. Whereas at my company, Propellerhead, I'm like, come on, doesn't anybody want to go out and get a beer? Come on, guys, we're building cool stuff. Let's go talk about it and have some beers. But no. I mean, a part of it is, of course, like I got to go pick up my kids at doggies, so they're leaving at like 3:30, 4 o'clock to pick up their children at daycare. But the other part is even people that didn't have kids, they're like, no, I got my own thing.
Yeah, I guess it's more sacred here to also have like a life outside of work, basically. Which has its benefits and drawbacks.
Yeah.
But if you compare output, then would you say that you get more stuff done in the Japanese way?
Oh, that's a tough question. For one thing, the kind of software that we built at Propellerhead and at Ennis is completely different, so it's really hard to say. With Propellerhead, what we're building is a lot safer in terms of it's not completely known, but it's a known system. Like, okay, you have to be able to play music, you have to be able to have instruments, you have to be able to have a beat and things like that. And okay, now we're adding more instruments, or now we're adding more beats, or now we're adding a way to add beats and music.
You're always, when you came in that stage, you're always improving something that you already have.
Exactly. It's very rare that you make something entirely new. But the thing with game development, and that's a whole bunch of GDC talks is, but it feels like almost like every time you're making a game, you have no idea if what you're building is the right thing. You make it better in the process of building what you're building, but not building the right thing. That's really tough, because building fun is very, very, very difficult to put into an equation and have a win-lose condition known from the onset. So I don't know which way. I think there's probably Swedish companies that work similar to Japanese ones in terms of for building games and things like that. I mean, there's lots of indie games in Sweden too, and they're going through the same problems that you have in Japan, where you think that you can build a concept that's going to be fun, but you really, until it clicks with people, that's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know about that. But I know that the Swedish government, the social system is very much more supportive of financial failure, I guess, here than it is in Japan. So, if you have a startup and you tried, oh, well, it didn't work. Now, we just close up the company. Maybe we go to Försäkringskassan for a while, and you get your support until you get back on your feet and work someplace else. And that kind of system is not there in Japan. And a system where if you get burnt out and maybe kind of have like a mental stress from your work, that kind of mental care too, and like financial support when you're on disability is harder to come by in Japan. So there's also the stress. Oh, okay, if I get too burned out, or if I become too stressed and then I can't come into the work, now I'm not getting paid, and then I'm even more stressed, because I'm not getting paid, then I can't go to the office and things like that. It's a downward spiral where it's like in Sweden, be like, okay, then you can go on, hook Griven or whatever, and then the state will help take care of you until you can get back to a good state.
So you were working at Propellerhead, but now you're working at the gaming company.
Yes, I founded my own company last year.
Yeah. So tell me about that story.
So one of the things that drew me to Propellerhead was the mobile apps that they were making. They made an app called Figure. And Figure was a way to make music in a way which was not traditional. It wasn't about having a piano roll where you drew in notes and did something in a very programmerly type way. It was more of a performance way of making music. And that playful nature was really appealing to me. So that's why I joined Propellerhead, and that's the mobile apps are what I worked on for my time there. But during my time there, I met another person who is Swedish, and he has a technical background also, but also a musical background. And when we both at different times decided that we were going to do something else with our careers, we left our respective companies, and then we started talking, and then we kind of had the idea that maybe we could try making games together, because that was something that was interesting to us. For me, it was always like, I gave myself a timer. When I moved to Sweden, I said, okay, in 5 years, I'm going to be back in Japan, or less, kind of I thought. But I think what I was telling myself at the time was, in 5 years, I'll be back in gaming. Is kind of the timer that I gave myself, because I think that's how long, at most, it'll take me to recuperate from getting a little burnt out. And so I met my co-founder at Propellerhead, and we founded a company together last fall, and now we are making music games together. And we're making our first game for Nintendo Switch, which is going to come out this year.
And that is Hexagroove?
That's right, Hexagroove.
And what's it about?
Hexagroove is a music game for people who have had dreams of being a DJ or being a musician. So what it allows you to do is to live the dream of being a DJ and produce music. So where normally you think of the word DJ, it could be, okay, I'm mixing Queen and Michael Jackson or something like that. But in recent years in the industry, DJs have to also be producers. You have DJ producers, people who are making music and also DJing it, DJing other people's music and remixing it, and then building their own. So in our game, what we do is we allow the player to make music. But making music is a very scary thing to a lot of people who aren't experienced with it, because you're like, okay, where do I start, or what should I use? So what our game does is it takes some tips, some rules for making music, and those are the rules of the game. So we put you on rails and then slowly give you more and more freedom to make music in real time. So you're performing music in a club for a virtual crowd. So by playing this game, every single gameplay will be unique. There is no fixed level. It is entirely procedural in how it operates. So the way I play level 1 is completely different from the way you play level 1. It's different from how I can play level 1 the next time. Every time you play level 1, it's a new way to play level 1, a new way to express yourself, and you can discover for yourself what kind of music you like, whether it's more beat heavy or more melodic, or you want to do it fast or slow, and how you approach it.
And what makes the audience like the music that you're playing?
So the audience likes the music when you follow the rules, quote unquote. And I hate using that word, but it's the rules in the game anyway of how music should be made. So if you add and remove things on 4-bar increments, or if you can maintain a good rise and fall of energy over the course of your set, over your song, those are things the audience responds to. So making tactical choices about which pieces of music you'll use. It's a strategy game at its front, but it's real-time strategy because there's no waiting. The drum is already rolling once you start the level, then it's up to you to decide what comes next. So you put the pieces of music together and you make these choices, and it affects energy levels, which get the crowd excited, and then it moves you into the next song section. And then just when you think you understand what's going on, you get into a mini game, and the mini game is like a rush of frenzy, because that's the bridge. Maybe you're doing a drum roll connecting the chorus to the breakdown or something like that. And when you hit the last note in that, it's just going to be whoosh and throw, that white noise filter sweep over the crowd, and everyone's going to love it and put their hands in the air. So we have all these frenetic moments of bridges in between contemplative real-time strategy moments, which is kind of turning the way things are the other way around.
And you can play this without having any musical background.
Yes. So having a musical background will let you probably score more points faster, but we've set it up so that you can't play bad music with this. I think that's one of the big fears is you give someone an instrument or a piano. What if I hit a sour note, or what if I'm not in rhythm, or if I'm off the beat or something like that? But we take care of all those things so that at the very worst, the music just sounds okay. But if you have a little bit of skill, it can sound fantastic. So there's no fear for sounding bad and looking dumb in front of people or yourself.
What has been the most challenging thing while developing this?
I think it's getting traction. Traction in terms of getting other people to collaborate with on board, getting marketing and publishing and those kind of things together. Because there's so many people making games these days, and the market is so saturated. So to step right into it and have no other games built with a company that was formed just a couple months ago, nobody wants to really get backing for that kind of thing, or jump on board as a lead artist or whatever. So the best you can do is just kind of point to the cred from your previous companies and try to use that as a little bit of a bridge. But we've been lucky because we have put together a really good group of people at just the right time to build something at the scope that we've wanted. So it's really starting to click now.
And how have you solved the financing of the company?
That we haven't really solved so much. So we're still working privately funded out of pocket right now. So it's a matter of we need to ship soon so we can put money back and restore the savings accounts a little bit, so we don't have to worry about paying the rent next year.
Okay. So the upcoming couple of months is really, really important for you guys.
Yeah. I mean, we have backup plans. We do contracting part of the time too to cover the most essential things. But yeah, for everybody's working so hard right now, they deserve to be compensated for their hard work. So we're really hoping it's going to get a good return when it comes out later this fall.
We could go into the segment under the magnifying glass.
Mm-hmm.
And you have chosen a Japanese game.
Yes.
And what's it called?
It's called Gitaruman.
Guitarman.
Guitarman, that's right.
And why did you choose it?
So I was thinking about it. There's so many games that were important to me, but a lot of the games that I loved when I was a kid were like adventure games or storytelling games. But Guitarman is not just a storytelling game. It's a music game. And it's actually the game that Ennis made right before I joined the company.
Ah.
So, I mean, I played some Japanese games when I was a kid, like the ones that Nintendo had and Capcom, all the ones that were westernized. But playing a game that was very much Japanese in its nature and its blood was something that I didn't really experience until I started interviewing with Ennis. And Guitarman is a game that tells a story that's sweet and cute and everyone can understand and get behind. But it also tells it in a way that's very tongue-in-cheek and artful. So the storytelling of a hero who realizes he's not a weakling and he's actually strong and he can do lots of good things and he should believe in himself. That kind of spirit and is very Japanese. And a lot of the levels and the situations you get into in the game are very Japanese. And so as a Westerner coming into it the first time, it's very quirky and like weird. And you're like, what? But all the music is so good. And that's because, like I said, Ennis was founded by people who are musicians and musical training. And you have all these different genres of music done so artfully, everything from like reggae to metal to like J-pop. And to see a wide variety of music and have all of it be appealing, even if you never listened to a lot of these genres, and to pick up the attributes. Okay, all right, when I'm doing reggae, it's about the beat, and this is the kind of groove I have to have. And then maybe if it's like electric guitar, you're like shredding, and it's about the really quick movements back and forth, picking stuff out and taking these things that, again, if you're a musician, you're like, yeah, of course, if you're gonna do that genre, that's like the thing you want to highlight. But they don't come and tell you when you're playing the game, like, okay, in reggae, this is important, or okay, in electric guitar, and in metal, this is important. But it comes across in the level design and the chart design, and also the characters that are built around those levels and the genres. So it's teaching you something. It's teaching you lots of things, and it's doing it not in a didactic kind of like, let's draw it on the chalkboard kind of way. They're teaching you in the best kind of way, which I think is the way that you don't realize you're being taught. And it makes you want to learn more about it. You want to learn more about music. You want to learn more about these genres you never knew existed, and why is jazz built like this, and what's that about? So those kind of feelings, I guess, and those values for gameplay were kind of woven in there, and I didn't understand them at the time when I first started working in this, when I first got the game, but it spoke to me. And that's a kind of message now, that message of music and teaching it in a way that's not boring classroom, but like in a secret kind of way of teaching, and then combining that with storytelling in a way that tells an important story. I think that's utopia to me.
Yeah. I haven't tried this game, but it sounds amazing, and I'm a big fan of when you get, it's really, really hard, but when you hit that mix with a game where you also, as you said, you can learn something, but it's not very explicit that you are learning. Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
Has it been an inspiration for Hexagroup?
Definitely. I think the teaching without really knowing that you're being taught is a big thing there, and having the feeling of an aspiration of being a good musician, of knowing, getting a taste of what it's like to be able to build stuff that sounds good and that can entertain people. That's really much at the core of what Hexagroup is about. Hexagroup doesn't have anything in the storytelling department, unfortunately, right now, in terms of, okay, we're a small company, we're starting out, let's pick our battles. So we're starting with what we know best and working with making it a very much sound heavy game. And I hope that people playing Hexagroup later will discover genres of music they didn't know existed, and be able to broaden their musical horizons and maybe inspire them to become producers, or at least listen to stuff outside of what they're used to in Spotify.
Cool. I think that's kind of what I was thinking to talk about. But before I go to my standard questions, is there something I've missed?
No, I think we've covered pretty much everything. It feels really, really weird, but really great to talk about it too. And I'm glad that we could have a conversation about the journey tonight.
Okay, cool. Then I just have my 2 questions. And the first one is, is there any way people can follow you or follow your company?
Yes, we have social accounts all over the place. You can find us on Twitter, on Instagram, and Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter at GameDevventura. You can follow Hexagroove at Hexagroove and Hexagroove Game on Instagram and Twitter as well. And our company, Ichigo Ichie, which is a mouthful. So maybe you just search for Hexagroove or search for me, then you'll find the company account.
What does your company name mean?
So Ichigo Ichie is Japanese, and it means one chance in a lifetime. It's a very important phrase in Japan because it's kind of tied into that Buddhism and like that like a samurai kind of mentality where every time you meet someone, this could be the last time you ever meet them. So you should conduct your affair with them, with respect and honor and love and compassion and make it a good interaction. So you never know when you meet them again, or maybe it'll be every day. Maybe you marry them. Maybe you never see them again. But that's the way we approach games. That's the way we want to approach our game development, is that this is our only chance, and every time is our only chance. So we want to give you the best possible experience for something that may change you forever.
Beautiful company name.
Thanks.
And my last question is, who do you think I should interview next time?
I think you should talk to Jimmy Nilsson.
Jimmy Nilsson?
Yeah. He's a programmer, a little more senior than me. He works at Midwinter Entertainment now, but he's got a long history. He started at UDS, and then he was at Pandemic in Los Angeles, and then at DICE for a long time. But he's been doing some pretty cool physics in some of the biggest games in the world for a long time, and now he's at a startup called Midwinter.
Where in Stockholm?
Yes. Yeah, he's here.
Okay, cool. I find it interesting. There are so many talented people. I haven't heard of him before, so it's quite interesting. Okay, thank you, David. It was really interesting to talk to you today.
Thank you. It was a great time.